Today, I want to talk about how light falls on an object and how when that light falls on it, it helps form the shape, but it also gives us an idea of, where the light is and what the light does. And if you were taking my drawing class, I would have you sit at different places around the table and we'd have one source of light. And I'd have you look at this from different angles. But instead, we're going to have to work from photographs. So I have 3 photographs here taken from 3 different lighting angles. This first one is what I would call mostly backlighting. The light source is coming from this side, from this bright window that we see right here, and it's coming and it's putting a little rim light on the edge of this fruit. It's throwing a shadow that's coming a little bit toward us, and it's creating a mostly dark area back here. But we've got some light on the tabletop here that's throwing a little bounce light down into that area there. We're getting a little bounce light from this fruit into the back side of there. So there's little places where it's not totally dark, but our darkest place is right there, and down in the shadow. So that's backlighting. Now, classic side lighting. Side lighting is beautiful stuff. Side lighting really helps show the shape of something. So something round like this, your lighting is going to come on a little bit of a curve around the piece, just like it did actually on the edge of that. The one that was backlit, we also had a curve of light that ran around here that's helping to show that this is round. So we have a curve of light that actually comes almost an S curve that runs down through here. It's a little bit darker right there. Our lighting, as we can see from the shadow, our lighting is coming in from this angle on the photograph, darkest back in here, little bounce light coming in and filling there, but the bounce light's not hitting that one, so it's dark back there, bounce light filling in here. Little darkest place somewhere up in there, nice shadow running off of that. And then front lighting. Front lighting can make something look pretty flat, but there's enough sort of bounce around this that the front lighting is not totally flat on this. We're seeing that our highlights are up here, so that means our lighting is coming from above. Our shadows are very diffuse, so we don't have a strong light coming in. It's more of an overall diffuse light that's happening. But we do have it dark back in here where the fruit is stopping that light from coming down. It's a little bit darker in here. Notice this beautiful dark space right in here. And our shadow, what there is of it, is down in this area here. So light's coming in from this way, from up above. So those are our 3 pieces. Now, to approach this, what I want you to do is first, let's start with doing the contour drawing. Contour drawings are beautiful things to work with. They help us see the edges of things. And with these beautiful little tops to the pomegranates, it makes a great side light piece. So let me just do a little quick contour drawing of this one here. I'm going to start right up in there and work my way around the outside of this grouping. So we're going to start up in here, and I'm following that top little piece that's got the peeled back, I'm not sure what you actually call these, but it's the top of the pomegranate. And then I'm going to come back in right in here. The little throat comes down, little throat comes down, and then I'm going to go back and grab this. So I've actually picked my pencil up once, twice. Now we're going to work my way around here. I'm looking at this occasionally, working my way around until I find the edge of this other pomegranate. It's going to be right in here. And then we're going to come back up on the other pomegranate. It doesn't come up as high, so I know this comes off a little sooner. I'm going to find my way over here. And then that little top portion of the fruit where the flower would have been. Actually, I just planted a pomegranate tree in my yard this year. It's the first time I've had one. And it's interesting because you can see these little fruiting bodies as part of the flower. It's already there. So that's that. And then that starts, it's going to be, this probably comes in here a little higher. This comes in here. And my third one comes off of this. It's a little bit closer to me, so it's probably slightly bigger. And, you know, I want to stop and do something here. I want to bring this across, because yeah, I was feeling that that was getting a little too something. And I think what it is that this all has to come down here a little bit further. Once in a while, you know, when you're doing these contours, I'm going to allow this, do a little bit of correction here. This is going to come across. And then this top of that flower fruit area, it's broken off a little bit. This piece comes down and across there and then goes up and around on that. And then there's another side to this that comes across through there. So that line's going to go away. All right, now just coming off of the edge of this is where this other one comes in. This comes in from up here a little bit. It's got a roundish body, comes in and around. Okay, and then this is going to come down. Yeah, that's better. That's going to come in like that. So now I've got that formed, and I can then come in and start doing the shading on this, or I could do a gesture drawing with it if I wasn't happy with my contour drawing. So let's, before I do any of the shading, let me come in and I'll try one of the others as a gesture drawing, just to sort of show the difference. Once again, I always like starting with contour drawings and gesture drawings. It's a good way for you to start seeing what's happening with this fruit and how it's going to be. So we'll work on this one. This one I'll do as a gesture drawing. And once again, I'm working with my BE pencil. So we have a fruit, one fruit that's sitting by itself. I haven't really talked about working from a photograph, but you know, something that you might consider on this is, where is the halfway point here? And come up here, where's the halfway point here? Where is my halfway point here? And where's my halfway point here? This is going to give me an idea where these things are placed. And if we do the same here, I could measure this and get this exact, but if you do it a lot, you get a feeling of the, what do I want to say, the layout, you know, approximately how big it is. You can see it pretty close. I might be off a little tiny bit. So this one here is going to overlap that center just a wee bit. It's going to be right in here. And then its fruiting flower top is right about in here. And those pieces go off of there. Maybe that's a little tiny bit bigger. And I only see 3 pieces of this, the rest have all broken off. And now there's a little bit of a space. My other one comes in a little above this. There's my halfway mark. It's over here pretty close. Maybe this guy can be even a little bit bigger. Let's make him even a little bit bigger. Okay. Doesn't come down up as high. It's almost out to the side of my page. And then its little flower thing is up in here, and you can see the throat of it coming down a little bit. Overlaps just a little. And then coming off of the side of this and up in here is our third piece. So these pieces, if you were to draw that line through, you can see these pieces are mostly in that corner. This piece is mostly in this area. And then if you wanted to have that cloth in there, it comes through somewhere in here and comes down into there. And that's about all of that cloth. There's a bunch of perspective that you could throw in on that cloth if you wanted to, but we're not going to do much of that today. But it's something, if you want to work on this more, you can think about how the texture on this runs almost straight toward us, and then as it gets away from our eyes, it slowly fans out this way. Slowly fans out to match that, and slowly fans out the other way. So this is where we're looking from, because that comes pretty much straight on. Okay. Gesture drawing, I've got that. Oh, let's see, we have to get this put in here too, and that doesn't quite go over that edge. And we'll be doing the shading in on top of that. Once again, this feels like these could come even a little closer to this. This one maybe could be even a little tiny bit bigger. And maybe it's, that's going to be a little bit better. Clean it up a little. Drawing number 3. So which should I do? Contour drawing or gesture drawing on this one? It probably doesn't totally matter. Let's just do gesture drawing on this. Oh, and you know what? I didn't draw into those other two, and that was where those shadows are. Now, this is, yeah, this other one is just slightly higher, a little bit away from here. Now, when you're working with a photograph, it makes it pretty easy to do this, figuring out exactly where it is in your piece. When you're working from real life, you're going to find it a little bit more difficult to actually set it up, because you're going to be worrying an awful lot about how it looks. And my tables go off. Cloth goes into there somewhere. What do I want to say here? You're going to be looking at those shapes and not necessarily at any background. You're going to be looking at, and I would highly recommend that you find some fruit, set it, you know, either where there's light from a window coming in like I had here, or you can get a desk lamp and put on it and set it up and play with this and see what it looks like under different lighting conditions and in different places. Now, this is that piece, and this is this guy here. Hard to see very much detail in this because with the backlighting, and this would happen if you're sitting at that table as well, that bright light is blocking so much of this light that this looks almost solid dark back here. But there is some bounce light that comes in underneath here. There's a little bounce light that comes up into the side here, a little bit comes into there. So now we are going to do some shading on these guys. So back to shading. Let's go back to the first one here. So I'm going to start with my shading in the center of pieces and start working out. And I want to see how dark that is compared to the back and compared to this piece. So this is going to be darker back here than it is on this piece here. It's all sort of relative. That isn't as dark as black, but it's getting, it's still darker than that. That edge is way up here. As we get a little further back, my value starts getting into value 5. So this goes fairly rapidly from being pretty dark in this little corner to being lighter until we get an absolute white spot here in those highlights. And then our next question is it lighter or darker than the background? So here it's darker than the background. Here the background is darker than the fruit. And over here, the parts of that background are darker than the fruit, but not a lot of it. Fruit is still darker than the background, darker than the background. But definitely over here, our fruit is darker than the background. Down in here, our background is darker than the fruit. Okay, so building this up, working at it sort of slowly. We're going to work with my 6B pencil, and let me go ahead and start with my back fruit back here. This I can tell is fairly dark right here. I'm not going to put any of that patterning that I see in the cloth into this photo that's drawing. You can also see that where I erased that one line, it's made a little mark in my paper that I'm not going to get out of there, and I'm going to have to just ignore it. That's one of the disadvantages of using a relatively hard pencil, because if your pencil is relatively hard, it will put marks into your page. So just working my way out here, sort of shifting. I can make these lines match the curve of this, or I can do a diagonal across there, and I'm sort of picking to do a diagonal, and then I will come and crisscross that again. We're going to bring that a little lighter up into there, and then we're going to crisscross this and get this even darker back in here, and work my way slowly up into the other part of this. Just try not to get too much too soon, because it's easier to come back in and really darken it up. We tend to get a little afraid of getting it too dark, and so I like this way of sort of slowly working my way into that, finding that it's darker, and then where is it really dark. Now this has got a little bit of light here. Don't want to lose that. So this is where that fruiting stem comes down, and it's pretty dark right there, and then it throws a little shadow. So there's a little bit of darkness there, comes out, and then there's a big highlight right there, big highlight over there. And then this is mid-tone inside of that shadow. Gotta watch where my edge of my pencil is here. I might have to come in and erase some of that because it got a little bit dark. Mid-tone. Now I have another highlight here, which means that I had more than one light source. But I want to leave it there. It's nice because this is showing that we had a little more than one light coming down in on here. And it's a little bit dark right at that edge. And then that curves up in there just a little. And then let's just go in here a little the other direction. And we can do a little bit of blending with my finger. And really find that darker there. And then in here, we have a darkness that there's some remnants of the old flower in there, and it's left a light space. That's going to be a little bit darker right there. It's a little dark on the edge of this. There's actually a little depth to the side of that, so you see a little darker on the edge. It's a little darker right there, and this is a little darker on the edge, and then very light on the top of that, a little bit there, and back side of that's a little darker. Back side of this is a little darker, and then it's darkest right there. Okay, so this gets me pretty good. That's a little too dark right there. Let me see if I can just touch it with this eraser. There's two different types of erasers that I like to use. One is a kneaded eraser, which you can form into a lot of different shapes, but it also picks up all kinds of stuff from your desk. So this kneaded eraser, and to clean it, you do this, you actually stretch it and clean it, and it pulls the graphite into it. And with this, you can sort of dab at the page and soften that in. And so I can take a little of that off, and then this shape of this is almost triangular there, which we want to have happen. That's nice. And then if I feel like I'm maybe a little bit dark, I can just dab a little tiny bit at this and pick up a little bit of that, and then I'm going to smudge it around just a little. And it still feels like it needs to go maybe a little tiny bit darker right here. And then I'm going to start working on my next piece. So I'll do that same kind of shading, that gradation. So it's darkest in the little dark areas, it slowly grades up and it's nice and light around the top. And so that's the type of shading that's going to happen on that. And then the shadows work their way off over here and underneath of there, and they're not very dark because of that sort of ambient overhead lighting that we're getting. So there's a little bit of side light coming in, but mostly it's overhead. So the shadowing is pretty light, but it is a little darker than our fruit right in this area here closest to it. So in that area, my shadow is a little bit darker than the fruit. And then it softens out and gets light pretty fast. Maybe I can run that sort of the same way that those that texture in the cloth is running. So that shadow is going to be back in there. Just to remind myself that that shadow is there. Side lighting. My highlight is in a little bit different place. So I have a highlight right about here, highlight it right about there, and this highlight's actually right in here. I'm seeing something else that's interesting here. And that goes up into there. All right, so now with this side lighting, which one do I want to work on? Let me go ahead and work on this one because it's got perhaps the biggest amount of variation in it. My back one is in a lot more dark. This one's got nice variation in it. I actually like what's happening with that shadow running across through there. But this one's nice too. So my darkest area on this, and do we need to clean up those edges at all before I start? Better to do it now so that that's not interrupting what else I'm going to be doing. And yeah, this comes up toward that edge even further. Let's let that be a little bit bigger, and then that guy can stick out a little further. And this feels like it comes off that angle a little more. Now, my darkest area is right in here, right into this part of it. So let's go ahead and work on that first. Because I can establish sort of that darkest area, and then there's bounce light coming up in underneath of here. So this is still darker than my light side, but it's not the darkest area. So I can come across this with one run and get that all the way to that edge and down into right about there. It comes at a little bit of a curve here, so a little bit of a curve, and then this darkest part definitely runs at a curve. Let's get this all the way to that edge. Sometimes I have to come back in and sort of fix that edge because you tend to want to sort of go over that edge a little bit. Now, there's a dark piece that comes in right here all the way, and then it's this little section in here. I have a shadow that's running off of this piece and running across here. And it curves as it goes across because it's going around an round object. And then this shadow spreads out a little bit and disappears into my dark. And then this is my darkest area in here, so let's just get that nice and dark. And maybe that shape comes out here just a tiny bit more. It's a little bit lighter there, but let's soften the edge of this dark with just a mid-tone right next to it. And then that mid-tone's going to work its way all the way back into here. I'm actually seeing some reflection up onto that fruit too, which I am going to ignore for right now. Okay, so that's my biggest highlight. And now I have a highlight over here as well. I'm just going to sort of draw it so I know where it is. And there's there's some unevenness to that edge. This is dark, but not my darkest black. It's going to slowly work its way. So this is mid-tone, and this gets a little bit lighter. A little bit lighter as it works across through here. And boy, now you can start seeing some of the things other things that I've drawn in this pad, and I've got marks showing through here from some of them. But this is just exercises, so I'm not going to worry too much. Now this is going to go, this is not bright white, this has got a little bit of darkness to it. This is the other thing that it takes us a while to learn to see. The local color is red, and red we think of as being relatively dark, but it is a lot lighter. It is a lot lighter. That part of the red, okay, it's darker than that. It's lighter than this gray. It's close to the same value as that gray right there. But then when we get into this back side, look how dark that is. That comes out almost black there. At my darkest place, it is black. And so my value range between this side and that side is pretty great. And then, of course, that highlight is our white. That's our lightest spot right there. But we've got some other places. I'm looking at this little piece up on the stem there, and these little pieces right next to that white, which are going to be in this value 8 or 9 range. So we have to sort of pay attention to that. And let's see, it's going to go a little bit darker there, and everything is relative. So once you've established how dark your darkest dark is going to be, then everything can be relative to that. That's going to come in a little bit on there. It's going to be a little bit darker here. And there's a sort of a triangle of a little bit darker wrapping over that edge. And this is maybe a little tiny bit darker right down in here. And then this whole area to me looks a little bit darker than anything over in there. Now I maybe need to, let's just pick this lighter and get that line that I took off out of there. And then I'm going to just erase this a little tiny bit next to that. And then smudgy, smudgy, smudgy. I didn't put a smudge tool out here on my desk. A smudge tool would have been really nice here rather than my thumb, but it's okay. Now, the other thing that is going to make this look lighter on this underside is to find our shadow. So the shadow comes off of here and then turns and goes back and has a little shape to it. And then how far, let's see, where's that shadow there? Shadow comes about here and rounds in. It goes out just a little bit. It's softer back there. It's pretty hard line right here, and then right next to my fruit. Because my fruit, remember the valleys and cliffs that I was talking about when we did that first shading. If there's a lot of space between the object and where the dark is, you're going to get a very hard line there. And so that's why we have a hard line at that point. Now, as we get back into here, I'm seeing my shadow being almost the same color as that fruit. And then it's going to soften out and get a little bit lighter as it gets further away. And I'm seeing the darkest part of the shadow being right in there. Don't need any white spots at all back in here. And then that fruit is just a wee touch darker than the background right there. So that needed to go a little bit darker. And let's see, I have a number 8. And with this number 8, we can get the darkest darks. As long as I haven't sort of ruined the surface of this, pressing too hard with a pencil that wasn't really soft, I can come back in with my number 8 and put some dark on top of there. And then in here, we just have some dark spaces. Not all dark, it's dark right around those edges, dark right there, and some dark spaces. Dark on the edge of this, and a little bit there, right there. Lighter here. Dark on this edge right here. And then this petal is pretty much dark, but it has a light edge. So hopefully we can keep that light edge still there. Okay. And then this just, the shadow, we want it soft out here. Goes off on sort of a corner. It's still relatively dark there. Fill that in just a little tiny bit more. And now we've got light coming in from this side, and once again, my eraser. Oh, I've been using it so much that it's really dirty. So what I'm doing is coming in with my eraser and just cleaning it off a little bit. So I've got a clean edge on it. I want to get this highlight lifted out of here again so that we have that highlight. And this little highlight here, I'd like to get rid of those lines that I put around it if I can. That looks better. And that's going to come out to that edge. Good. And then the other pieces are going to come through here. There's a shadow that comes off of here. There's a shadow with a little bit of a break right between those two pieces. So this is all going to go darker. And when this goes darker in here, I need to just do it this direction right next to there so that I can get a nice clean line. And once again, clean line. And these shadows come back in here. Clean line on the back side of that. Those shadows merge. And that's going to soften out. Because there's texture in that cloth, it has a light and dark pattern. I'm going to ignore that. I just want to sort of get the feeling of the general feel of it. Okay, so that gives me a good feeling for how that shaping is coming across through there. If I want to spend more time, I could get those other two pieces of fruit done, but I am not going to at this point. You're going to work on these. My last one to work on is the backlighting. Now, once again, we are going to be working on getting this from the center of the piece out, and we're going to pay attention to where there's light. And part of how we're going to see that light on the rim is through doing the background. I'm almost tempted to do a little bit of that background to start with, just so I know where it is. But no, I can do it later. And do I, let's get that just a little tiny bit more. I'm coming in with my little bit darker pencil there, knowing that I'm going to have a darker background back behind there. That's going to be fine. 6B pencil, working from the center once again. Going to work across this, just sort of block in the biggest part of the dark, and then I'm going to work my way up toward that edge, and I'm going to leave a little bit behind. It's a little lighter down in here because of that bounce light, and then it gets darker pretty quick. And then this dark, as we come down, this sort of semi-light area angles down in here until we get right to that base. Work my way across through there. It's a little bit lighter over on this side, but it's not white. And then when we get up into the shoulder, notice how it stops and lightens up in that shape and then darkens really fast behind that into that dark area. And then the stem stops right at that shoulder, so there's a pretty hard line, and I'm not seeing much light coming around that. I am seeing a little bit of shape that comes down, and there's another stem, and then there's some bits of those stamens that stick up. But this is pretty light all the way across that shoulder, and then as it comes around this side, it starts getting to be where it's darker than its background. My darkest area is right back in here, so let me get that 8B on here, my darkest pencil, and work through this area, and then it works up and around here. And yeah, that looks good. And then this all the way to this edge. And then this shadow comes off of here. My very darkest place is right here. And then that shadow's going to come off of this right about here. This is the darkest area of my shadow right in this area here. It's almost the same as the piece up above. And then it lightens up considerably over here. And if I got it too high there, I might just erase it off a little tiny bit there. This is going to stay a little bit darker than that shadow all the way down into there. And this is lighter than the dark, but it's not as light as my top piece. And then that shadow's getting even a little bit darker there. Okay, so this shadow is coming off of here, yeah, and then it goes out and gets a little bit fatter there. And then the shadow is actually a little darker back here because there's bounce light coming off of this fruit into that shadow and in underneath of there. And if I wanted to show some of that texture on this, I could, on the edge of this shadow, actually show some of this ins and outs of this texture. But it's not crucial to me to do that, not at this point. If I really wanted to do a nice detailed drawing of this, I would do that. That goes a little bit that way. This is a little softer out there. And remember, this is going darker, and then it's going to kiss right into this other shadow, which is coming off of that piece. And then that shadow continues on back there, and it's a little lighter on this back side, but it is pretty dark right in here. So those two shadows merge together at that point. And this maybe comes up just a wee touch higher there. Okay, so, and I want that to be a nice line there. I can come back in and do a little bit of erasing and a little erasing on this guy before I would start working on it. Get that gesture drawing extra bits off of there so that I'm happy with the shape that we're doing. Let's see, this was a B, and I don't want to press too hard with that B or I end up with divots in my page. Okay, so I need to do something here. My hand came in and really darkened this space here. Now I could come in, and there's some darks that work across here. And there's darks that are darker, but maybe not quite, and there's a little bit of a highlight right on the edge of that. I'm going to make sure that this edge is nice and clean. Come in and draw right next to it and really clean that up. This is all darker. We want the feeling of that window, I can just give that a straight line. This is really quite dark back that way. There's a dark piece, right, real dark piece right here, and then mid-dark for all of this. And when I do that, see how it brings the edge, light edge of that fruit out by having it darker back behind there. We've got a dark piece that's coming up here. And since I don't really care if that says anything about that space, there's a dark piece here too. I don't necessarily want this to be defined, but I can if I feel that that environment is going to add to it. There's some curtains that are here. And now I'm seeing something. I think this should get erased right there to make that. And then this highlight, now that I've quit rubbing my hand around in there, I can come in and lift out this highlight. And it's not quite so much of a highlight here in the middle. So let me just smudge this so that those highlights really show where they are. This could get quite a bit more time on it. I could come back in and work my drawing and really refine this and get beautifully smooth lines in there if I wanted to spend the time. But I'm not really going to, but I'm just feeling like I want to come in here once more with this diagonal to relieve this feeling of lines across through there and maybe make this feel more like it's round. I'm not doing it all the way across, just from the darkest area there. This is darkest right up in this area right here and down into this area here. It comes as a little bit of a curve. Okay, that's feeling pretty good. And then this is really pretty dark right up here. It comes up and finds the edge of those little pieces on the top of that fruit. Okay, so that's that one done. You know, that could get worked on as well, but I'm not going to. You're going to. You're going to finish these. So what we've been looking at is, you know, how does the light look at here? How do the background help show some highlights on things? How much is in shadow when it's backlit versus side lit, versus front lit? And so each one has a different amount of light, different amount of shadow, but they all help show the form. So that is the lesson for today. And I will have given you time to work on each one of these projects along the way. So let's try them and see how it all works out.